Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick check. Can you hear all right in back? All right. And if I accidentally block any too much of the slides, just wave at me and let me know you can't see it, and I'll move around. Welcome, and thanks a lot for offering me the opportunity to talk. My name is Jerritt Johnston. I've been working at Sustainable Ely since its formation so many years ago in May or so. What's great about this project is it's really a grassroots effort, and when I was asked to join in the effort, I jumped at it for a number of reasons. But it's been fun to work from an idea which came around. The idea was floating around for a number of years, but then it took a couple of folks to really get it going and on the ground. And really from idea to implementation of opening the storefront was about a month and a half. And a number of you were volunteers for that, and we appreciate the work. But those of you who've been on ground floor efforts know how much fun that can be. I'm going to talk for probably about 50 minutes today, and I am going to start off just with a little bit of background on Sustainable Ely. So first off, everybody's familiar with this concept that there is a planned sulfide mine, copper nickel mine, twin metals being developed in this area. It's one of a number of planned new mining operations dealing with copper nickel along with polymet and local stories recently, including Tech Corporation. So it's one of a number of mining developments. And a group of citizens really thought that we needed a local voice on this topic. You know, lots of people from all over, both in favor of this mining development and opposed to it, have weighed in with their voices. And there were a group of 5 couples, many of you know them, that decided they needed to take action. And so they formed this. They went to Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness, which is a local organization that's been around for some time. And Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness, who from here on forward I will call NMW, decided to fund this operation. So Sustainable Ely is a project of Northeastern Minnesotans for Wilderness. And along with the general work that's being done on this topic, these folks thought it was important to open a storefront on Sheridan Street to have conversations with locals, visitors, seasonal residents, and anybody else who wanted to stop in and learn the facts about this new mining development. And we've had an incredibly successful summer. First off, and probably most importantly from my opinion, is we had almost 50 volunteers go to volunteer training to sit in on that. And then we've had 35 volunteers who contributed over 1,250 hours of volunteer service to keep the center open 7 days a week, which has just been incredible. And the types of conversations that have been going on in the center have just been outstanding. People on all sides of this issue, and please note that I will always say all sides of this issue, because I don't believe that there are only 2 sides of this issue. There are lots of nuanced opinions. This is a complicated subject, and it's one that we're going to be discussing for a number of years moving forward. People on all sides of this issue have been stopping in, having a cup of coffee, sitting down and drinking a cup of coffee, and having good conversation, which is really key to what we're doing. We also want people to be empowered by this. You know, it is difficult to get involved in any contentious issue in the Ely area. Looking around, I can see folks who are involved in nearly every single one of the contentious issues in Ely. And we all know how difficult that can be because of all the things that are at stake. And so we believe that it's very important for there to be a local voice on this topic. With that, along with those things, we also interacted with about 500 people at local festivals, Blueberry, Harvest Moon, and the Fisherman's Picnic down in Grand Marais. And we have probably, I haven't been able to count every signature, but we're probably closing in on about 500 signatures on the canoe that we have, that is our physical petition, and then hundreds more signatures on an online petition that we hope will protect the boundary waters and this watershed for years to come from this type of mining development. Let's see. All right. This is one of my favorites. I've been using this picture for years and years and years.
She's getting older.
She is getting older. Most of you are probably familiar with this. How many of you initially see an old woman on the screen? An old woman. All right. And how many of you see a young woman turned away from the screen? All right. How many of you can't see both images? Is there anybody that'd be willing to say, I don't see the other one? Thank you very much. All right. I appreciate that, because a lot of times people aren't brave enough to say that they don't see them. But let me point something out to you. If you can only see the old woman, then think about a younger woman turned away. Here's her eyes and her nose, chin. Okay, and this is her ear with the hair flowing back. And if you can't see the old woman, she has that nice big honking nose with the wart up on there, and then the chin down here. Now, those of you who couldn't see it, once I pointed out a couple of details, were you able to see both sides of that, both images? That's what we're going to be doing today. Ely is represented by this picture in a whole lot of ways, I think. But oftentimes people can only see one story or the other. And the storyline that many of us continue to hear, that I and many others disagree with, is that our town looks like the old lady in this picture, and it's getting older and it's dying. And so I'm going to point to a few ways, maybe give you some road marks to move to seeing another vision of Ely that I think, not only is it my opinion, but I think the facts bear it out fairly well. So enough of that picture. Oh, and you can take a look at this while I say these couple things. Economic development, as most of you know, and the decision to support or oppose sulfide ore mining or copper nickel mining is an incredibly complex issue. Okay, I've been doing a lot of research. I've been doing a lot of reading of stuff that's already been done, and I'm going to point out a few things. This is by no means a full explanation or a full picture of everything that's going on with our economy, with our area. Okay, and so please don't try and put the idea that I'm saying this happened, therefore this happened. There's never only one single impetus or single explanation for why anything happens. But I think the explanations that I've come up with here are pretty well based, and I've stolen them, and I'll give credit to the people who've developed them as we go. So a couple weeks ago we heard about some of these drivers, and these are things that I believe are stable economic drivers, and the facts bear them out. The tourism and recreation industry, I'll be showing you some numbers in just a little bit, that talks about the fact that since 2000, these numbers have continued to increase, with the exception of this year. And we'll see what the full numbers of this year are by the time we get there. And let me be clear, with the exception of a couple of months this year. Let's wait till the entire year is finished and we have solid numbers before making judgment about how this year has performed. Vermilion Community College, that's a stable economic driver. That's going nowhere. This year their numbers are down just a hair, but largely that's due to the availability of housing, and last year they had record enrollment. That's a stable force in our economy in this town. And one thing that isn't always recognized is the role that the students there play. They fill much needed employment, they fill jobs that are difficult to fill in the fall, winter, and spring. And they contribute to the community in a lot more ways. The football team in particular does a number of community service programs, that sort of thing. All of the government or agencies, Forest Service, Minnesota DNR, Border Patrol, Minnesota Department of Revenue, those employers are not going anywhere. Now granted, right now is not the time to say that our federal government is great, but in general, historically, those are stable positions. The Minnesota Department of Revenue is one that many people don't often talk about. That is an employer that, according to the Ely Echo, has supplied 110 jobs that are on site at that location, with another number of folks working from home and telecommuting. The base salary is about $34,000 with benefits, with state benefits, and then you move up from there. So that's an economic success story that brought 110 jobs at least to this area with little to no environmental impact other than those basic operations that we talk about. So I think that's one important to talk about. Healthcare, of course, the hospital clinic, the new VA clinic, school district, quality of life residents. I was going to put old people, but Steve said that calling quality of life residents old people is not appropriate. So I'm going to talk more about that group in just a little bit. All right. So some statistics that show that our economy isn't doing so awful. And a quick note, 1991, 2001, and 2002 were not available from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. I left those in there just to indicate that. Later in the presentation, I eliminated those. But this is from the Department of Revenue website. This is gross sales inside the town of Ely since 1998. It's all the statistics available. And I apologize if it's difficult to see, but in 1998 we were just over $100,000. I think that was, $104 million. Our high point was in 2000. I also understand 2001 was a good year, but this was at about $112 million in gross sales. That's taxed and untaxed sales inside of Ely. But you can see that it goes up and down, but it's right around that $100 million a year is roughly where we are. 2012 numbers are not available. All indications are that 2012 was a spectacular year for this area, and so I'd expect those numbers to be a little bit, at least over 100 million, probably in that ballpark. So inside of that, you can see where some ebbs and flows in the economy are. You have 2001 and the hit that tourism took after 9/11, 2002 I mean, and also you can see some of the impacts of the recession. But that's a fairly stable economy, and we continue to move in the right direction in general. All right. In which census did Ely reach its highest population of 6,156 people? Anybody want to guess before I give you the multiple choice?
1930.
Oh, somebody already got it. Chuck, you jumped right ahead. Nicely done. The answer is 1930. Okay? That's the last time Ely showed a population growth, the city of Ely. Okay? And that's an important piece of the story to tell. I often hear people talk about the heyday of Ely, and I wasn't around. I'll be quite clear about it. I wasn't around in the 1960s. Oh, wait, I wasn't even born in the 1960s. Sorry. Wasn't around. But as we often do with stories, we put two pieces of information that aren't actually related together. When people talk about the height of Ely population, they're often talking about back in the 1960s, back in the heyday before the mines closed in town. And unfortunately, that actually isn't the high point of Ely population. The town, Ely itself, has been declining in population since 1930, or at least between the 1930 and 1940 census. And that's an important piece, I think. So now, let's look at Ely populations. All right, so I'm going to go through this kind of decade by decade. If you can't read, the blue at the top is Ely. Starting around 5,500, 5,600 at the 1960 census. Excuse me. The red is Morse Township. That teal color is Fall Lake Township. And common sense, or the common wisdom of the area, is what? That Ely's population is going down and the township's populations are going up. Can we agree on that? Is that what does anybody disagree with that? All right, well, let's look at the facts here. Again, 70 to 80 population is declining in two of the areas. Fall Lake is seeing a little bit of an uptick. And then we hit 1982, between 1980 and 1990, when a couple of mines closed. And the Ely population, Ely economy took a major hit. Went from just under 5,000 people to below 4,000 people who lived in town. It's more difficult to see, but Morse and Fall Lake also take a slight dip at that time. not as significant as Ely. Then, after that time, the population in Ely, the decline starts to lessen, and at the same time, we are looking at increases in Morse Township, Fall Lake, and Eagles Nest. So an oft-quoted number is that Ely's population has declined about 6 to 6.5% between 2000 and 2011. I don't think that's an accurate number, because Ely is no longer just made up of its town. Even a lot of people who make that comment and say that Ely is losing its population, those folks used to live in town and now they live out in a piece of property in the woods or on the water. And so that's a trend that's happening. And that doesn't mean that this town is going down, it means that it's changing. All right? So with those numbers, I plugged them in, and I'd be happy to share with anybody how I got to these numbers and the specific statistics behind them. But basically it's based on US Census data, as well as the American Century Survey, which is kind of replacing the long form for US Census data. But when you include the townships, and you can see that I only included Fall Lake, Morse, and Eagles Nest for kind of ease. There are unincorporated townships that are not included in this data that I think would continue the trend of people living in the woods increasing. So if you just include those 3 townships and Ely, we've really only come off our population from 2000 by about 2.1%. Okay? And that's a much different picture than 4.5 or 6 to 6.5. And I think that's an important part of the story. The total area population as of 2011, using those ACS numbers, is 5,706. And again, that does not include some of the unincorporated areas. If people move to Ely, I may be one of the few exceptions. I chose to live in town because my kids are now 3 blocks from school, and they can ride their bike or walk there. It's been super convenient. But most people who've moved to this area want to live out in the woods or on the water. It's understandable. It's our biggest asset, is that natural beauty. Seasonal residents, also when we talk about these, seasonal residents are generally not counted in this area. They're asked to count or be counted in the census where they spend the majority of their year. There was an area market survey done in 2010 that showed that as compared to year-round residents, seasonal residents actually spend significantly more dollars in town than local full-year residents. So their impact is not shown in our statistics, in our population statistics, but it is shown in some other stuff that I'm going to be pulling up here in just a second. And again, I'm not really a numbers guy, so if something isn't making sense, raise your hand and say, Jerritt, clear this up, because you're not speaking very clearly. The other thing I'll talk about the census is the median income of Ely has been referenced numerous times by folks who think that our town is declining. People who are counted in the census generally, or can be counted, are college students. When they fill out their census, they're asked if they're a college student, and they put in their income, and they put where they live the majority of the time. And so almost 600 students put in Ely. And so that income level is then figured into the median income level. So that's an important piece of our story too, because that obviously would bring down the median income. Now, getting to you old people again. And I know that these are difficult to read, and I'd be happy to share them. Come up to Sustainable Ely, and I can show these to you. But this is from the Economic Profile System based on US Census and ACS data. And basically what I've done is compared Minnesota non-metro overall, St. Louis County, Virginia, Ely itself, Morse, Fall Lake, and Eagles Nest was not available in this statistic. But if you look, let's just use Virginia, or actually better reference is, if you look at typical aging patterns based on 10 years of census, you see about a 1.7 year increase in the age of the U.S. population based on that. If you look at Virginia, you see about a 1.9. Don't correct my math, I think it's pretty close. 1.9 increase in average age, or median age, sorry. If you look at Ely, you see about a 5.3 increase, or I'm sorry, about a 6-point increase. And then you look at Morse, you're looking at 8, and Fall Lake, you're looking at almost 8 also. Now that cannot be explained by the population that's in place aging. Okay, what we have, the data that we have shows that large numbers of people between the age of 40 and 64 are moving to the area. Okay, that's some of you people at least a few years ago, and some of you today, right? Sorry, I told Elton I wasn't going to make any jokes about him, but so we have statistical data that shows that late career, early retirees and retirees are moving to this area in large numbers. Okay, now that some people may see that as a negative. I personally see that as quite positive, and not just because you all are my friends. There's some really interesting research out of the University of Minnesota Extension talking about a brain gain, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But we know that people who move to new communities as they're either in mid-career or late career or retirees are more engaged in those communities than they were in their old communities. When they move into a new town, especially rural towns, they become more engaged. So they volunteer more, they spend money in town more, they support local organizations financially, and they share their talents with their community. Looking around, I'm involved in a number of community organizations, and I see a whole bunch of folks who volunteer a whole lot in this community, and they support nearly everything. Anytime you go to a fundraiser or something like that, the folks here are in attendance. Okay, that's also true of a lot of people who aren't here. One of the strengths that Ely has is a huge civic engagement, high voter turnout, a large commitment to the youth of this area. So that's one of this area's strengths. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a bit. The other thing is retirees' families visit. I know at least one person here who says he runs a bed and breakfast for his family each summer. And so he just turns over the beds every week. Okay, I mentioned this a second ago. This is some really, really interesting research that is coming out. It's by a guy named Ben Winchester at the Center for Rural Development, Minnesota Extension. And almost all rural Minnesota counties experienced population gains in the 30 to 49 age cohort between 1990 and 2010. Again, population estimates, population counts are incredibly complicated, because if you read that first part, the common wisdom is that rural areas are losing people, okay? And in general, that is true. But it matters who towns are losing and who towns are gaining, okay? So it's commonly accepted wisdom that 20-year-olds to 25-year-olds leave small towns, okay? The data proves that out. They go to town, they end up in towns like the Twin Cities, they go on to colleges that are, in other places, okay? Whether or not it's even down to Hibbing to go to the technical college, but they leave town. It's also statistically proven that fewer and fewer people are living their adult lives in the town that they grew up, okay? And that's another really important point. So those 20 to 25-year-olds are going away. They're getting an education. They're getting some experience with work. And many of them are then choosing to come back when they are of child-rearing age, when they have families, and they want to come back to a small town that is affordable, it's safe and secure, it's simpler. Okay? I don't have the choice of 5 coffee shops to go to now. I think I only have 3 that I can go to. And so that's important. The other piece that continues to show up in the data again and again is the quality of life, the access to outdoor recreation, the access to amenities. So projects like the recreation center that a number of people are working on, those projects matter to attracting 30 to 45-year-olds. I hear again and again, we want young families with kids to move to this area. Those things matter. And the outdoor recreation, this area can't be beaten for that. All right. Let's see. I want to make sure I don't miss anything on that. In general, about 30% of the people moving to rural areas have lived in that area before. Okay, so it's not just the fact that you're losing, that a town like Ely is losing the local kids who've graduated and gone on to college. Those kids at about a 30% rate come back, and their spouses, when they come back, have also generally lived in that same area. So they go away, they might even go to the same college as their future spouse, and then they come back to raise their family in their hometown. Okay, 75% of the people who choose to move back to their communities, at least I'm quoting some stats from West Central Minnesota. This hasn't, but it's been shown nationally as well. About 75% of people who choose to move back are married when they come back. So you're +1 right there, and 51% move back with families. And so you're gaining population there. So this is an incredibly interesting piece of data, or a number of pieces of data. So again, if you're interested, it's Brain Gain by Ben Winchester. Some really good stuff. All right, I think I'm out of statistics for a while. Bear with me here. So when we walk around town, I think each of us has our own set of filters on that we see. There are things that I pay attention to because I am a father of a couple of young kids that you may not. There are things that you see because of your experience or education level or job level, that sort of thing, that I don't. But here's some things as I think about the community that I think show that we're a vibrant and healthy community. And this all lines up with research that's been done by Blandon on healthy communities, the assets that communities need to be healthy. There's some really good models out there. But first off, WELY Twins Affiliate of the Year. That's really cool, but not only did they win that, they got $5,000 for the Ely Little League, which is a tremendously run organization with a whole lot of community involvement. And I'll jump right down to a new playground that a number of people in this room worked on. And if you haven't been to an Ely Little League game when the streets close off and it's a nice day out and the kids are playing at the park and there's the farmer's market going on and there's a smell of pizza coming through, you're missing something. That is one of our absolute joys in this town. And that people in the cities would nearly kill for that experience. We've had friends come visit and they just can't believe how awesome that is. The Ely Nordic Ski Club, for those of you who aren't members, you should be, ENSC, we just spent $13,000 on trail updates that are going to make our cross-country ski trails among the best in northeastern Minnesota. They're rivaling Giants Ridge at this point, and the grooming is phenomenal. And that all comes from support from the community, by volunteer, by fundraising, by using that space. And then that goes on to allow kids to ski on those for races. We all know how successful the Nordic Ski Club is at the school, the Ely Nordic Wolves. And that's because people in the community contribute to that. You can talk about the arts community all day long, both visual and performing. The renovation of the Pioneer Mine site is just a tremendous feather in the cap of this town. A stable school enrollment. Last year, I believe we gained just a couple. This year, I think we're up one, or we're right in that area, one or two. And last year, my daughter's class was the first time in a long time they've had 3 kindergarten classes. And that trend, they almost had to add another one this year. Bear Center, Wolf Center, Dorothy Molter Museum. Not many towns our size have 3 major tourist attractions that are run as education centers that draw people in. I'll go ahead and quickly mention the Bear Center. I have it in another one. Most of you are probably familiar that over $250,000 has been brought into this community by supporters of the Bear Center through online social media competitions and contests. The Wolf Center received major funding, Bearhead Lake State Park, the city. All of those were supported by people who may have never even been to this town but are connected with our nonprofits. And I think that's an incredibly important thing, $250,000. We have 2 local newspapers. Most towns our size don't even have one anymore. And I think that's really, really important. We have a whole list of Ely's the best of, the places you have to visit before you die, the best place to go in the winter for tourism. The Chamber of Commerce has a list of about 40 different things. Don't want to waste your time on that. We have the Outward Bound, YMCA camps, Boy Scouts and Girl Scout bases, internationally known explorers. We have 2 grocery stores. Again, towns our size generally don't support that level of grocery store. We have 2 hardware stores that are going. We have a robust spiritual community. People can find people with their own values to worship with in this town. This is one that I think is incredibly important. We have strong, socially focused nonprofits. If there's a need in this community, people step up and address it. And there are nonprofits to prove that. From all the way from, hold on just one second, please, and I'll get to you. From the food shelf to the hospice respite care to many, many things. Ely Community Resources. People step up, they raise the money, and they do the work. Yep.
I would have you add that we have a tremendous lumber yard.
Yes, thank you.
Go there without knowing anything, and
Yep.
we will get whatever you want and bring it to your house.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. And they work quite hard to make sure that if the consumers want, you can get sustainably harvested lumber that is as locally sourced as possible. So I think thank you for saying that. The other thing that we can't ignore is that people know that this area has a great work ethic. The heritage in this area is of hard-working people. You don't make it here unless you're willing to, to roll up your sleeves and do work. And that's one of the statements in the stories I've read about the Department of Revenue. That's why they chose to locate here. They knew that the folks who they'd employ would show up, they would work hard, and they wouldn't have to worry about absenteeism and lack of work. A couple of really significant projects coming up. The biomass project that seems to be moving forward. I haven't stayed right up to it, but not only could that put us on the leading edge of some green technology and heating our system and making us less dependent on fuel oil, which is becoming more and more expensive all the time, but it could create new markets for our flagging lumber industry. And so if we can get that through and we can push that, that will help the health of our forests. It will help area loggers, and it will help defray some of the heating costs for our local businesses and agencies, and hopefully in the future, individuals. And then broadband. I'm not sure where they stopped digging, but we need this in our community, and we need it to be affordable. And it's close, but it needs to happen for a whole bunch of reasons, because I'm going to show a couple things here in just a second that I can talk about why that's important. And I'm certain that I missed some of these. Like I said, each of us has our own filter that we see the town through. Yep.
Yeah, I think the obvious one I have to mention that's a real attribute to our community is right here at Tuesday Group has been wonderful.
Yep. And I think there are groups meeting all around. I think, again, the high voter turnout, no matter what political stripe one is, Ely and the surrounding area has an incredibly highly engaged civic population. All right, now back to some statistics. I got away from that for just a minute, but we're back. So we already saw Ely. We've seen Morse, Fall Lake, Eagles Nest, and then there's a town that I'd like to spend a couple minutes comparing Ely to that I think is pretty interesting. This, if you can't read it, this is Eveleth. Look at how closely its population mirrors ours. In 2011, I think it was at 3,600. Based on ACS data, and I think we're just over 3,400. The projection for 2012 on Wikipedia is that it will only have about 100 more people than Ely. So for a whole lot of reasons, Eveleth is an incredibly good reference point for us. The median income, as has been mentioned in previous presentations, in Ely is about 34,000. In Eveleth, it's about 35,000. So again, it's pretty equivalent. Both communities largely dependent on mining in through the 1960s and 70s. You can see that both communities were negatively impacted by that mining, the bust in mining in the 1980s. But here's a really important and telling thing. These are gross sales, again, going back to that data. This green line is Ely. Just over 100,000, right around 100,000 the last Thank you, 100 million. I'm not used to numbers that big. My brain doesn't work that way. 100 million. And then you see that Evelyn had 1 year, it was at about 96 million. But then it looks like, and I don't know a specific event that I can explain this, but at the same time that Ely had that significant drop, so did Evelyn. Evelyn has never recovered. Evelyn continues to have retail and gross receipts, gross sales in town, right around the $40 to $50 million mark. Okay, so that's about a $65 million a year difference between a town that has so much in common with us that that we can basically look at our history, look at what it has done. So what explains the difference? Okay. Possibility of tourists, possibility of seasonal residents, possibility of people who choose to spend locally, who don't live in town, but choose to spend in our town. Another truth about older generations who retire is they're not as comfortable ordering on Amazon as those of us who are a little bit younger. Sorry if that's not you. I'm making a big generalization. But they choose to shop locally a whole heck of a lot more than younger generations do. And that has an impact. Quick comparison, per capita spending. Okay, so this is if we took every resident from Ely and divided that number out. And if we took every resident from Evelyn. $30,540 of spending or of sales in Ely per resident. I know I'm not spending that much in sales in town, okay? And if you took that same number for Evelyn, it's about $11,000. That's a $20,000 per person difference in sales in Ely, okay? Again, why do people come here? It's the natural beauty. It's what's available to them right outside the door. Evelyn doesn't have the boundary waters. Evelyn doesn't have the history of resorts, of outfitting, of spending that time that Ely does. Okay, there may be other differences too, but that is one that jumps out to me. All right, now I'm going to jump through this. So, if we believe that what is outside our door has value, has significant value, has $60 million of value each year, okay, then developing something that has the potential of damaging that is a real economic threat, okay? This is not just, wacko environmentalism at this point. This is talking about the economic impact of something that could damage what is a major driver in our area. So those giant multinational corporations, they want to develop several large mining operations. This is not just twin metals, okay? This is twin metals, this is Teck, this is Polymet. In just a second I'm going to show you a map that may be very difficult to see, but come by Sustainable Ely and you can see it up close. The history of sulfide ore mining or copper nickel mining is one of destructive acid mine drainage, heavy metal contamination. 40% of the western rivers are contaminated because of copper mining. Okay? If acid mine drainage does occur in this watershed, which many of us believe that this mining cannot be done without that damage, drinking water, fisheries, people, and the wildlife will all be at risk. It will create significant surface disturbance. I've talked to a couple of people who, like me, hunt and fish quite a lot, and they hunt out on the Spruce Road or out Highway 1. And every single one of us has had the experience of going up in our deer stand and hearing industrial noises while we sit in our deer stand. A number of us have chosen not to hunt out there anymore. And I don't say that because it's selfish and it's my little private woods or that sort of thing. That's not what it is. If I'm having that experience, I'm probably not the only one. Okay? It'll negatively impact, a couple of things. Large industrial operations pollute the air. They pollute the noise, or they have noise pollution, and they create light pollution. Okay? Another one of our draws is the possibility of seeing stars that no one in the cities can see, no one even in smaller cities can get out and see. And if that's impacted, that will encourage people to go somewhere else. So I've heard a number of people say that mining jobs will bring families to town. Data doesn't really support that. Generally in today's mining age, it's individuals who are highly trained, highly specialized. They go and work at the mines, and then they go back to their residence. They go back to their home. They don't bring their families with them in general. Okay, but that brain gain group that I'm talking about does. They move to rural areas because of that lifestyle, and if that lifestyle will be negatively impacted by industrial development, they may not move to that area. Here's that map that I was talking about, and again, I know it's incredibly difficult to see. This is on Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, but here's Ely up here, and so we're not just talking about Twin Metals. All of these colors through here are potential mining developments. They're leases that have either been signed or in the work, and projects that are being developed. So we're talking about changing the face of the entire Eastern Superior National Forest. So that's why this time is so important to working on this issue. Again, going back to the economy, mining is boom and bust, leaving the community worse off after the mines close. There will be jobs that come from this mining development, and a number of them will be good paying jobs. I don't believe, and the statistics from other places and the stories from other places don't bear out that there are going to be as many as the mining company says. And once they're gone, because the community has become dependent on one sole industry, the community is worse off than it was before economically. Mining companies have a tradition of leaving the town, declaring bankruptcy, and leaving that mess for someone else to clean up. Taxpayers have to do it, and you know, I'm about as liberal as they come, but when it comes to my taxes, I'm as conservative as you can get. I don't want to fund multinational corporations in their operations for taking what is wealth on our public land. They permanently degrade the landscape. True restoration is not possible after large industrial mining operations. Reclamation is possible, we've seen that, but you know, but not true restoration to what it was before the operations took place. And mining production is dependent on world demand. Right now, copper prices are high enough that this is sustainable, or that they believe that they can make a profit, but they've been dropping since 2011. And once those mining operations are up, we all know from taconite, from iron ore, that when the demand goes down, they either shutter or they reduce operations and people are laid off. This is not a situation where it is consistent over that life of the mine. A couple statistics about improvements and technological improvements. Employment in copper mining has declined from 36,400 in 1972 to 10,400 in 2007. In 1960, 200 miners were employed per million tons of ore. By 2005, only 80 were employed per million tons. Technology happens, and we know that businesses try and reduce costs to increase profit. The easiest way to do that is to limit the number of employees that you have and increase automation. Okay? And you can't blame them for doing that. That's what companies are in the business to do, is to make money. So, having said all that, I'll wrap this up in about a minute or two with some statements that Sustainable Ely has agreed upon. We believe that a diversified economy will support our community long into the future. Our economy is strong, it's relatively stable, it can be better. No one wants to stick with the status quo, but we need to develop sustainable jobs that will take care of not only what's out there, but what is to come, and encourage families to live here for the long term. It's created, economic developments, it's created by individuals. It's not created by large corporations. It's not created by the government. It's created by individuals with entrepreneurial spirit. Ely's history is one of entrepreneurial spirit. And there are a number of new business owners in town. You can look around. Some of those older businesses, folks have decided to retire, to close their businesses. But if you look around, there are a whole bunch of new young business owners that are stepping up. A new toy store is opening in just a week or so. That's a great thing. We have the Pebble Spa, owned by a young business owner who is working hard in this community. We have an outfitting business that was recognized, nominated for a small business award from the University of Minnesota Duluth. These are folks who are jumping in and taking the next generation of business. Small business is where it's at. We're a small community. If we can get a business to grow by one or two, Get 5 businesses to grow and you have 10 jobs that will support families. We are uniquely situated to attract and retain high-quality individuals. The natural surrounding in this area is an economic driver. It is what attracts people to live here. And for folks like me, I moved here, lost the job that I had, and I decided that I wanted to try and stay here. It wasn't because, I thought the hill going up to my house was great. It's because I can be out in the woods in 5 minutes, and I can get away from society and my technology very quickly, and I can raise my family in that sort of a setting. Another really key point is Ely is larger than its city limits. We need to stop talking, when we talk about Ely and economic development and its future, we can't just talk about the residents of Ely. I am a resident of Ely, so I like to be Ely-centric personally. But we need to talk about our larger community because that's where we're at. Every resident and visitor matters. It frustrates me greatly when I hear, depending on the topic, oh, this person shouldn't weigh in because they live in the township, or they haven't lived here long enough, or they're only here a week and so they live down in the cities and they don't know. We are fortunate in that people all over the world love Ely. They come here, they spend their money, they support us through other ways, and they're very envious that we have the opportunity to live here. And we need to make use of that. So with that, one final comment. I am a person who believes in finding compromise. It's one of the things that I've worked really hard at. The more I've learned about copper nickel mining, sulfide mining, is that we're not in a situation where we can have both. I really don't believe that the science adds up. The history of copper nickel mining doesn't add up that way. Our community is facing a choice on this issue, and we need people to get involved and get engaged so that we make the right one. So I guess I'll open it up to questions. Yeah.
It's a pretty big group, so I'll just run the mic back and forth. Who would like to ask your question? Way up in the far corner.
All the way in the back. Jerritt, 2 questions for you. Do we have some rough idea of what the labor force is going to be for each of these enterprises, and is there a median wage that we know about that we can use as a benchmark for measuring profitability in the enterprise?
Yep. So the question was, let me rephrase it and make sure I got it right. What are the number of jobs associated with the development, and what is the median age or medium wage that's going to go along with it? By my understanding, we have not seen those numbers from Twin Metals because they haven't created their mining plan that's been presented. So I could have missed it, and if somebody has that, I'd gladly talk to them afterwards. But my understanding is with this development, no. Polymet, using that as an example, their numbers generally are moving down the closer they get to their plan. Initially it was 1,000 jobs, now it's 1,000 jobs construction, and 350 long-term jobs or 20-year jobs associated with that. And one thing that I think is key when we talk about jobs, mining companies, and in particular these copper nickel mining companies that are multinational, have not committed to union mining jobs. They've committed, at least Twin Metals by my understanding, has committed to union construction jobs, but they've said that they're going to allow the workers to decide. And I grew up in a union family. I know what allowing workers to decide about union wages, about unionizing means. They won't be able to do it because of the tactics of companies. So.
It seems to me, and
No.
it seems to me, and I'm a new resident, and actually I've spoken a couple of times to your group, that the community of Ely is growing into the size of a community that it's going to be. And we're not there yet. We don't know exactly what that final size is. And we've got lots of storefronts that are closed because they were here when Ely was a different size. And eventually Ely will become the size it's supposed to be based on all the data that you have. And I think we need to figure out, now that we've got a new road through town so you don't need shocks every week, that it is important to figure out how do we get the empty storefronts to look less empty And somehow, I don't know, it's a way that we need to have the community look different, based on the size it's going to become.
And I originally did when I first moved to Ely, as many of you know, I worked at the Wolf Center. So what you're talking about biologically is carrying capacity, for a lack of a better way of saying it. And one thing, I hear the argument about storefronts being empty quite often. My understanding, and those of you who've been around longer than me will be able to know if this is true or not, is that many years ago, many of the businesses kind of stopped at the top of the hill. Like Zoop's was kind of the end of the line for stores, and that over time, that has progressed. So we spread out, including Chapman, and so we're covering a wider area with the number of stores, and that happens in towns. People take risks. That's the entrepreneurial spirit, because there are a whole lot of stores that are not empty. We're just spread out.
Speaking of empty storefronts, before I was civilized by matrimony, I had an apartment in Mountain Iron next to the job. I was working at Mintac. And in those days, I had a grocery store next door and 2 bars across the street. Life was pretty good. Then Pat and I went back there a couple of years ago for a meeting, and the grocery store is gone. We're down to 1 bar. And so what I'd point out was that the main street of Mountain Iron is half a mile from the main gate of Mintac, the largest taconite operation in North America. So having a mine right out your back door, there's no guarantee whatsoever of having a prosperous community.
And thank you. That was actually one of the points I meant to make when comparing Ely and Eveleth, is that there are 3 functioning, the largest mining operations in Minnesota are within working distance of Eveleth, and those are still the numbers. So thank you for bringing that up. And I believe that there is a city beautification committee rolling, because there are other people committed to that idea. And so I think that's something that's gaining traction. And in my opinion, and this is just me speaking, it's a heck of a lot more fun to sit around and talk about these ideas and our possibilities than the other side of this equation, because I think we have the resources and the talent here to make that happen.
How do you see that it's possible to protect the EPA so they can make a good decision?
As soon as I answer this question, I'm moving to Washington, D.C., where I will start my new job. No, I think that's an incredibly good question. I mean, our government is, they can't even agree to fund the government at this point, and the trend has been to weaken the EPA consistently over the last number of years. I think that's something that many people are working on. Because if you look around the country, whether it's copper nickel mining, whether it's frac sand mining, whether it's development of oil fields or of major pipelines, many small communities are facing the exact same challenges and are looking to our government to protect their livelihoods, protect the environment around them. And so I think there are people paying attention to that. We are locally focused on this specific issue, and we are working on every avenue that we can.
Yeah.
What is Sustainable Ely's position on Highway 169 dilemma with the sulfide flag that's been raised out there?
Yep. From my understanding, I was talking to Bill Erzar about that topic. The question was, what's Sustainable Ely's position on 169 with the sulfide issue there? My understanding was that was a concern that was raised by a resident who is a former DNR geologist. That's my memory of the conversation with Bill. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But I'm sorry.
It's broader.
Right, but that was the initial conversation. That is not something we are participating in. We are focused very closely on the mining development issue.
So the sulfide issue on the highway is of no concern?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think a lot of the folks who support us are very concerned about it. We have a very specific focus from our organization, and so we want to maintain our focus on this issue. There are other people working on that, just like you know, there are lots of issues in this community that I believe concern sustainability, but we're not going to be focusing on them.
One other question. What is Sustainable Ely doing as far as to entice business to come to town so we can have a year-round economy rather than the 100-day economy that we have with tourism?
Yep. So I spend a lot of my day to repeat the question, just I'm doing this partially for Richard too here on the video, but what are we doing to entice new businesses to come instead of just the 100-day economy or the 100-day season? A lot of things. As you know, economic development is incredibly challenging. The IRRB has been working for 70 years to diversify the economy on the range. Many people believe they haven't quite achieved that yet. The City Council has a professional economic developer that they've contracted with, and he's been working to do some things. What we're spending time doing is, first of all, learning about this issue as much as possible. When I've talked to business owners, one of the things that they've talked about is the burden that the Ely city property tax puts on them. So we've had a couple conversations with people who work on the property tax issue, lobbyists as well as a representative on that issue. So the short answer is a whole lot that's behind the scenes. It may not all be about enticing new business. As I said in our slides, if we can get 5 businesses to grow by 2 people, then there are 10 full-time jobs there, okay? So the other thing I would say is I've mentioned to Ross and other city councilors that NMW has put their money where their mouth is. I'm there working on these issues, and I'm available as a resource to help look at some of that stuff. Is it what I'm going to be doing full time? I can't commit to that, but if there's something that I can track down, I'd be happy to. I would also say with Up North Jobs, Gerald and I have talked a number of times about a lot of things. If there's something that we can collaborate on that brings jobs that are sustainable and clean to this area, we'd be more than happy to look at working with them. May not be on the subject of mining jobs or sulfide mining jobs, but on other issues, we'd be happy to get together and work.
Yeah, Jerritt, I wanted to say that I appreciated very much your whole presentation. I think you did a terrific job of capturing what I think a lot of the people in this room think about what the town of Ely is really like. So I thought that was terrific.
Thank you.
I wanted to throw out one suggestion for some ambitious person in the room to get one more metric. You had a lot of great metrics. There is a big open pit mine within easy driving distance of Ely, the North Shore Taconite mine just outside of Abbott. It would be very interesting to know how many people currently living in the Ely area work at that mine. That would be a good metric for what the effect on Ely is going to be from, say, Polymet, which is going to be even further away. Most of that operation is going to be on the other side of the Continental Divide. Right now, you might have to drive a long way to get to those jobs. The Twin Metals jobs, some of those might be approximately as close as that existing North Shore mine. So if someone could do a little research, that would be a way to get, we wouldn't have to speculate so much about what the economic impact in terms of number of jobs. That would be one good.
Add to it the amount of energy the proposed mines would be needing and where that would come from and the attending CO2 pollution or coal ash pits, things like that.
Yep. Yeah, we know for a fact that electrical infrastructure, that when I talked about air pollution, light pollution, and noise pollution, a good chunk of that will come from that electrical and industrial infrastructure that's required. I don't have specific data on that, but I bet we can track some stuff down. So,
okay. I had a question too, just
Sure.
for you or anybody on the biomass projects in the region. I attended one brief meeting here, and that project didn't seem to be getting off the ground very well. And there are a number of other groups in the region who are also interested in that. I don't know if they're all communicating. Who can I talk to about that?
Oh, yep. Yeah, because there's the Ely Area Energy Task Force, I believe.
Regarding your presentation,
Mhm.
you've omitted any mention of the volunteer work and the two great organizations, American Legion.
Thank you.
VFW.
Thank you. And Veterans on the Lake also.
For many of
Yep.
these
I apologize.
things that were the volunteers.
Yep. I absolutely, and I apologize for that. I attended the fundraiser at the Veterans on the Lake last week, and as you know, my commitment to honoring and recognizing veterans is sincere. So.
Okay, one more question, how about that? Somebody raise this now.
Yep. Bob's raising his hand. I'm going to defer this one to Bob Tammon.
The technology is coming, now, when you mentioned Australia, the technology is coming for automation. And I think I saw a mention in the Ely paper recently about a truck driver making $100,000 a year. Well, in Australia, they're automating the trucks. You don't need a truck driver. Some kid with a joystick back in the control room or an automated program, they'll be running those trucks. So it's what we're looking at in Minnesota for whatever, in my working lifetime, productivity double only takes half as many people to ship the same amount of ore as when I started in '69. So the trend is not going to change. So if you want to know what's going on with automation, keep an eye on Australia because they have so many remote camps, and we're going to be seeing it here.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Jerritt. We appreciate it. Good job. And see you all next week. Here's your cup. Mug 2.
Yes.